Today we'll be working in my workbook called Opening a Window into the Psalms, and this covers Psalms 1 through 21. Each of these videos will be one psalm. And I wanted to take a quick look at the general study of Psalms. I won't be doing this with every Psalms, but the first psalm of each book that I cover, I'll be kind of going over this. Basically, there's a lot to be learned from the Psalms. And sometimes we know when the Psalms were happening, and sometimes we don't. And most of them were written by David. As we have as we work through the Psalms, we can kind of place in his life when it was. He was energetic and all for God, and the warrior part of him we see in certain types of Psalms. We see the why is everybody after me during the near the end when Saul is truly pursuing him and he just doesn't know why all these things are happening. We have the time when he's a king and the royal psalms and the psalms of um, all that. And then later in his life, when again things are happening that are not the way he likes them, and when his son is after him and the whole thing. And then at the end, when he is very ill at the end of his life, we have some very depressing psalms. So those are the types of psalms we have throughout that David wrote. Obviously, there are psalms from other people as well. Let's first start with the title Psalms. Psalms is actually, the title was actually Psalter, which is comes from the Septuagint, or the pre-Christian Greek translation of the Old Testament. The traditional Hebrew title is Nahalim, meaning praises, although many of the Psalms are actually Tipholoth, or prayers. Tipholoth, or prayers. It's a collection of collections. The Psalms is a collection of collections, and it has, and it's at its final stage, it is represent a process of that has spanned centuries. The collection really starts at the time of David, although some of the Psalms are before David. Moses wrote a couple of them, but it's in David's time that things are collected in the form of Psalms. And once the temple was built, they were part of the liturgy that was sung in the temple. And it was finally finished around 4 BC. And it's not just a songbook, but the editor saw it as its instruction in faith in accordance with the law, the prophets, and the writings. And it's known as the Book of Psalms in Luke 22. So we know already at that point it's already been put together. If you read, and I love this summary, as someone said, if you have one book of the Bible to have on a deserted island, the Book of Psalms would keep your interest for quite a while. And the reason why my book is called The Window into the Psalms is because, as with any poetry, there's multiple layers that others might see that I do not. And the translation to English, some of the poetic structure has been lost. So it's a window, not a door, and that there's probably more there than I have discovered on these Psalms. And why only the first 21 Psalms? There are 5 books of the Psalms, and they're divided up. The first book has 41 Psalms. This book is so large, I could only have half the Psalms, so I took 21. So that's why that's a general study of the Psalms. The Psalms are separated in types of groups, as I said, the 5 books, but there's also divided in classifications. Wisdom Psalms, Praise Psalms, Devotional Psalms, Historical Psalms, and Prophetic Psalms. But you will find with every author, there's a different type of classification. Psalms really leaves it open as far as interpretation. Of the 150 Psalms, only 34 lack subheadings. And the reason may be that they were actually part of the Psalm prior to it, or maybe it just never did. The contents of the subheadings themselves, it sometimes tells the author, the name of the collection, the type of psalm, the musical notations and the sacramental notations, and maybe a brief indication of where it was composed. There's also musical nature to the Psalms. I mean, these were songs sung. So we have a number of words that are written in there. And when we get to those words in the Psalms, the description is also there. But there was a lot of, and we're only guessing on these words. We don't, because we don't have the musical, the instrumental part of the Psalms written out anywhere. So we really don't know how these songs are put to music. And the poetic features, which I seem to get into the most in describing these Psalms. But the type of poetic structure of Psalms is very different than how we do poetry. We often talk of poetry as rhyming and these things, but you rarely see things rhyming in the Psalms. You see other kinds of structures. And most of those have still come through in English. Anyway, so here's the table of contents, and we'll be doing Psalm 1. Now, where did these titles come from? If you look at the Psalms, they have no titles. These were titles that were added. I believe these come from actually the King James Version or the New King James Version. So this is what someone has named them, and it was easier than just putting Psalm 1, 2, 3 and up through. So now let's work on our first Psalm. The way of the blessed versus the wicked. Blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers, but whose delight is in the law of the Lord, and who meditates on his law day and night. That person is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, and whose leaf does not wither. Whatever they do prospers. Not so the wicked. They are like chaff that the wind blows away. Therefore the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the assembly of the righteous. For the Lord watches over the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked leads to destruction. So, in talking about the Psalm, this Psalm is the first of the book of Psalms, the first Psalm of the first book. And every time you go to a study on Psalms, the commentary will focus on something different. I have some commentaries that believe every Psalm has to do with the Messiah. I have some commentaries that really do a deep dive on other things. So I've given you a brief example of how these different commentaries work. The NIV Study Bible states that Psalm 1 and 2 were connected, which is it makes possible sense since Psalm 2 has no subheading. Psalm 1 talks about the law, and then Psalm 2 is going to talk about the prophets, I believe. Now, according to another commentator, Jamieson, Fausset, and Brown, and the Nelson Study Bible, so they are in agreement here, Psalm 1 is classified as a wisdom or a didactic poem in that it offers a comparison between the righteous and the wicked, similar to Proverbs. So any psalm that is similar to Proverbs where it compares is considered a wisdom psalm. Historically, since the writer of the psalm doesn't specifically tell us when it was written, there are some differences of opinion. As to the date, both Nelson Chronological Study Bible and the Blue Letter Bible believe that Psalm 1 was written during the time of Nehemiah, between 586 and 322 BC. However, some commentators believe this psalm was written entirely by David. And I believe the evidence points to Psalm 1 and 2 both being written by David. The reason is that Psalm 2 is definitely connected to David. And if these were connected, Psalm 1, therefore, would have to be connected to David as well. And the psalm breaks down into two sections and has a conclusion. First section, and all psalms are divided into sections. That's kind of how they wrote the Psalms. And so that's what a good way to study in them is to look at all the different sections. So, getting back here, the first section is the way of the blessed, and the second section is the way of the wicked. Then the conclusion, which is verse 6. So as you look back at the psalm, you can definitely see there's a comparison between the blessed and the wicked, and then a conclusion. So this is a very easy psalm to be able to see that the differences. So the first section is the way of the blessed. Psalm 1 is a psalm of contrast. First, in verse 1 and 2, the psalm talks of the way of the blessed. A man is blessed if he doesn't walk in the step with whom? With the wicked, right? B, a man is blessed if he doesn't stand like whom? The sinners. And a man is blessed if he doesn't sit in the company of whom? Mockers. Okay. So let's go to the next page. So walk, stand, and sit are gradual progressions deeper and deeper into the path of sin. Therefore, from these 3 lines, we can conclude, blessed is the man who does not take counsel of those who do not believe in God, nor walk on the same path as those who mock God, or sit in the company of those who don't believe. So let's continue to see these things. D, a man is blessed when they take delight in what? In the law of the Lord. And how often does a blessed man meditate on the law of the Lord? Meditates on it day and night. Okay. In verse 3, the psalmist compares a blessed person to a tree. This type of poetry is called anthropomorphism. Okay, if I said that right, hopefully. And how is blessed person like a tree? How is he like a tree planted by streams of water? A blessed person because he's is rooted in the word. How is he like a tree that yields fruit in its season? Because he's rooted in the word, the things he does brings positive fruit for God. I just ate breakfast, obviously. And how is he like a leaf that does not wither? It's constantly being fed by the water or the word of the Lord. Okay, I think I'm through all that. The last statement of verse 3 gives the result of being a blessed person. What is it? Verse 3. Whatever they do prospers. So a blessed person will prosper because they are staying rooted and grounded in God. So the next section is the way of the wicked. In verse 4, the psalmist tells us of the way of the wicked. How are they described? They are like chaff that the wind blows away. Chaff is the useless part of a harvested plant. In verse 5, we have what happens to the wicked, and it points to the scriptures in Revelation. First, what does verse 5 say? The wicked will not stand in judgment, nor the sinners in the assembly of the righteous. Verse 5 is an example of synonymous parallelism, which means saying the same thing 2 different ways. So basically, the wicked and sinners stand in the assembly of righteous, or will not stand in the judgment. So they basically say the same thing in 2 different ways. Now the scriptures in Revelation that compare to verse 5. Revelation 6:15, 17. Then the kings of the earth, the princes, the generals, the rich and the mighty, and everyone else, both slave and free, hid in the caves among the rocks of the mountains. They called to the mountains and the rocks, fall on us, and hide us from the face of him who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of their wrath has come, and who can withstand it? Revelation 21, 7 through 8. Those who are victorious will inherit all this, and I will be their God, and they will be my children. But the cowardly, the unbelieving, the vile, the murderers, the sexually immoral, Those who practice magic arts, the idolaters, and all liars, they'll be consigned to the fiery lake of burning sulfur. In Revelation 6, how do the wicked not stand against Jesus, their judge? They will hide in the caves and the rocks of the mountains when he shows up. In Revelation 21, where are the sinners assembled? They'll be assembled in the fiery lake of the burning sulfur. Like most Psalms, the last verse is a summary of what's been said. The Lord watches over the way of the wicked, the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked leads to destruction. So now, how does the Psalm live on? Although not directly quoted, the concept of Psalm 1 can be seen in other scriptures. David seems to refer to it in Psalm 26, 4 through 5. David also uses a similar contrast in Psalm 37. In Jewish readings, Psalm 1 is read during the Yom Kippur, or Day of Atonement. It is also read in Tu B'Shavat, or the 15th of Shavat, as known as the New Year of the Trees, celebrated on the 15th day of the Hebrew month of Shavat, marking the beginning of the agricultural year and the time when trees are considered to be a year older for the purpose of tithing. So that's the end of this psalm. I hope that you enjoyed it. I'm hoping that you will look forward to the other psalms I'll be doing. Thank you very much and have a great, wonderful day.